I'm Daniel, 36, and I've always been the guy who believed in fairy tale endings. 10 years ago, I married Olivia, the love of my life. At least, that's what I used to call her. We have a 6-year-old son, Jacob, who is the best part of my life. Everything seemed perfect, until recently. I'll start from the beginning. About a year ago, I had a terrible car accident. It was one of those freak things, a rainy night, a truck running a red light, and me caught in the middle. I don't remember much after the impact. I woke up 3 months later in a hospital bed, dazed and disoriented, with Olivia's face the first thing I saw. She was crying, clutching my hand, telling me how much she missed me. At that moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. I'd survived something that could have killed me, and my wife was there, promising me we'd get through this together. But over the months that followed, the cracks in our seemingly perfect life started to show. It wasn't anything obvious at first. Olivia was attentive during my initial recovery, helping with my physical therapy appointments and managing everything at home. But once I regained some independence, she became different. She started staying late at work more often. "It's a busy season," she'd say with an apologetic smile, waving off my questions. Olivia worked as an event planner, so I didn't think much of it at first. Late nights and last-minute client calls were part of the job. But it didn't stop there. We used to have this rhythm, you know. Every Friday night was us time, putting Jacob to bed early, opening a bottle of wine, watching our favorite shows. But suddenly, she was too tired or too busy. The spark that once lit up our relationship seemed dimmer. Intimacy became a rarity, and when it did happen, it felt mechanical, like she was going through the motions. Then there was her phone. Olivia was never one to obsess over her phone. In fact, she'd always joke about how I was the tech geek in the family. But now, it was glued to her hand. She'd jump at notifications, always angling the screen away from me. Once, I reached for it to check the weather, and she snatched it away, laughing nervously. "Work stuff," she said, tucking it into her pocket. It was the first time I felt that gnawing unease in my gut. I tried brushing it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. Recovering from a coma messes with your head, right? But the signs kept piling up. She was distracted around the house, barely engaging in conversations. When Jacob would ask for her help with his Legos or school projects, she'd sigh like it was a chore. That wasn't like her. Olivia was always the fun, hands-on mom. One night, I brought it up after dinner. "Is everything okay, Liv?" "You've been distant lately," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She blinked at me, clearly caught off guard. "Distant? No, everything's fine. Work's just a lot right now." "You sure? Because if something's wrong..." "Daniel," I said. "It's fine," she snapped, then softened immediately. "Sorry. I didn't mean to yell. I'm just tired." I nodded, letting it go. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Olivia had always been my rock, the steady hand that guided me through tough times. But now, it felt like I was standing on quicksand, and she was the one pulling away. That weekend, I decided to put in some extra effort. I planned a family day, picnic at the park, a movie night with Jacob's favorite superhero flick, the works. For a few hours, it felt like old times. Olivia laughed at Jacob's jokes, held my hand as we walked, and leaned into me on the couch during the movie. But when I reached for her later that night, she turned away, mumbling something about a headache. As I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the unease grew into something heavier. Olivia was hiding something. I just didn't know what. Yet. It happened on a quiet Tuesday evening, one of those rare nights when Jacob fell asleep early, and Olivia and I had a bit of time to ourselves. Except, instead of spending time together, Olivia had taken her usual spot in the bathroom. She'd been in there for almost an hour, her bathwater long cold by now. I was tidying up the living room when I heard it, the ping of her phone from the coffee table. Probably work, I muttered to myself. Olivia never went anywhere without her phone lately, which made it odd that she'd left it behind. Instinctively, I glanced over. It wasn't like I was trying to snoop, but the message preview was right there on the screen, impossible to miss. Ryan Blueheart, wish I could see you tonight. Missing your touch. My stomach flipped. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it. I blinked, staring at the screen as if it might offer some explanation. But the preview didn't disappear. I felt a sudden rush of adrenaline. My hands were clammy as I picked up the phone. Part of me wanted to put it down, to walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But another part of me, the part that had been questioning everything for weeks, couldn't resist. The phone wasn't locked. I opened the message thread. There they were. Dozens of messages. Ryan Blueheart, remember our first night? I'll never forget how perfect it felt. Olivia, it was everything I needed, Ryan. I can't wait to see you again. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. The texts didn't leave much to the imagination. Their conversations were littered with innuendos and intimate details, details that left no room for doubt. And then I saw it. Ryan Blueheart, that night at the hospital, I couldn't believe how brave you were. Sneaking into my arms while your husband was lying there. You're incredible. I dropped the phone as if it burned me. Hospital. While I was in the hospital, I felt sick. My legs buckled, and I sank onto the couch, my head spinning. I stared blankly at the floor, replaying the words over and over. This couldn't be real. It didn't make sense. Olivia was supposed to be my partner, my everything. And yet, while I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed, she was, with him. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. I couldn't process it. It was as if someone had dropped a bomb on my life, obliterating everything I thought I knew. Images flashed in my mind, Olivia sitting by my side, holding my hand, whispering that she loved me and would never leave me. All lies. Every moment of tenderness was now stained with betrayal. The sound of the shower turning off jolted me from my thoughts. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding as I placed the phone back on the coffee table. My hands shook as I tried to steady my breathing. She couldn't know I'd seen it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to confront her, not until I could wrap my head around what I'd just discovered. Olivia emerged from the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel, wearing the fluffy robe I'd bought her for Christmas last year. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. Hey, she said, walking past me to grab her phone. What are you up to? Nothing, I said, my voice hollow. She picked up her phone, swiping the screen. For a split second, her face changed, her eyes darting toward me, her mouth tightening. She turned slightly, angling the phone away from me. My stomach churned. She knew. Everything okay? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Yeah, just work stuff, she said quickly, typing something before locking the phone. It's been a long day. I'm going to bed. I nodded, watching her walk away as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just shattered my world into a million pieces. Once she was out of sight, I sank back onto the couch, my head in my hands. I felt like a fool. I replayed every moment of the past year, looking for clues I might have missed. Had she been with him while I was in a coma? Had she sat by my hospital bed out of guilt rather than love? The thought made me nauseous. My body felt heavy, weighed down by the betrayal. The physical toll of my recovery had already been exhausting, but this was different. This was a pain that seeped into my bones, making it hard to breathe. I thought of Jacob, sleeping peacefully upstairs, blissfully unaware that his parents' marriage was crumbling. Tears pricked my eyes, but I forced them back. I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. I needed to be strong, to figure out my next move. But deep down, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The days after my discovery felt like a slow-motion free-fall. Olivia carried on as though nothing had happened, packing Jacob's lunch, leaving for work, scrolling through her phone at night with that fake smile plastered across her face. Every time I saw her, I felt like I was choking on the weight of what I knew. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I could barely focus on anything except the impending confrontation. The opportunity came on a Saturday night. Jacob had been invited to a sleepover at his best friend's house. As soon as Olivia returned from dropping him off, I knew it was time. She walked through the door, humming softly, her face lit up in a way that made me wonder if she'd been texting Ryan the entire drive. I was sitting at the dining table, her phone in front of me. She froze when she saw it. Her hum stopped mid-note. "Hey," she said cautiously, setting her purse down. "What's going on?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." She blinked, her eyes darting from my face to her phone. "Daniel, what's wrong?" "Sit," I repeated, my voice steady. The tension in the room was palpable as she slowly pulled out the chair and sat down. I slid her phone across the table. "Unlock it." Her face paled. "What?" "You heard me," I said. "Unlock it." She let out a nervous laugh, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Daniel, what's this about?" "Don't play dumb, Olivia. I've seen the messages." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, but there wasn't one. She picked up the phone, hesitating for a moment before unlocking it and handing it back to me. I opened the thread with Ryan and slid the phone back to her. "Explain this," I said, my voice calm but cold. She stared at the screen, her lips moving silently as she read the messages. Then she looked up at me, her face a mix of shock and panic. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "Isn't it?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because it looks like you've been cheating on me. With Ryan. While I was in a coma." Her face twisted in indignation. "You went through my phone. That's your defense?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "That I looked at your phone. Not that you betrayed me while I was fighting for my life." She stood abruptly, pacing the room. "It wasn't like that," she said, her voice rising. "You don't understand what I've been through." "Oh, please enlighten me," I said, crossing my arms. She turned to face me, her eyes glistening with tears. "Do you have any idea how lonely I was, Daniel? You were lying in that hospital bed, and I didn't know if you'd ever wake up. I was scared and lost, and Ryan, he was just there for me." I stared at her, incredulous. "So your solution to loneliness was to jump into bed with another man? While your husband was unconscious?" "It wasn't like that," she shouted, her voice cracking. "He listened to me. He made me feel alive again. I was drowning, Daniel, and you weren't there for me. I wasn't there for you," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "I was in a coma, Olivia. What was I supposed to do?" She flinched but quickly regained her composure. "Even before the accident, you were distant," she said, pointing a finger at me. "You were so focused on work, on providing for us, that you forgot how to be a husband. I felt invisible, Daniel. Like I didn't even matter." Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. "So this is my fault now?" I asked. "You're blaming me for your choices." "I'm not blaming you," she said, though her tone said otherwise. "I'm just saying it's more complicated than you think." "No, Olivia, it's really not," I said, standing up. "You made a choice. You betrayed me. And now you're trying to justify it by rewriting our history." She stared at me, her tears flowing freely now. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice firm. You hurt me more than I ever thought possible. And the worst part? You didn't even have the decency to come clean. I had to find out by accident. She sank into the chair, covering her face with her hands. Daniel, please. I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Just don't give up on us. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. It's too late, Olivia, I said. You broke something that can't be fixed. Trust. Respect. Everything we built together. It's gone. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. You can't mean that, she said. We have a son, Daniel. Don't throw this away for one mistake. You threw it away, I said, my voice quiet but resolute. The moment you let him into your life. Into our lives. The room fell silent except for her quiet sobs. I felt hollow, like a shell of the man I used to be. This marriage is over, I said, walking toward the door. I'll stay in the guest room until we figure out the logistics, but I'm done, Olivia. I deserve better than this. She didn't respond. She just sat there, her face buried in her hands, as I walked away. As I closed the door to the guest room, the weight of everything finally hit me. The betrayal, the lies, the end of a decade-long marriage. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something else. Clarity. The night after the confrontation was the longest of my life. I lay on the stiff mattress in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying Olivia's words over and over again. Her excuses, her deflection, her audacity to blame me for her betrayal. It felt like my mind was caught in a never-ending loop, and no matter how much I wanted to turn it off, I couldn't. I thought the hardest part of my accident was waking up in a body that didn't feel like my own, weak, battered, and barely functional. But now, I realized that was nothing compared to this. The woman I trusted more than anyone, the person who vowed to stand by me, in sickness and in health, had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. And not just while I was recovering. No. She did it while I was lying in a hospital bed, completely helpless. That was the part that broke me the most. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to do anything to release the rage building inside me. But I didn't. I couldn't. Jacob was asleep at his friend's house, oblivious to the fact that his world was about to change forever. Jacob. The thought of him brought a fresh wave of pain. How was I supposed to explain this to him? He adored Olivia, and despite everything, she was a good mom to him. At least, she used to be. But now, I couldn't look at her without seeing the woman who had chosen another man over the family we built together. I got up and paced the room, my emotions teetering between anger and heartbreak. It wasn't just the affair, it was the fact that our life, the one I'd worked so hard to build, was a lie. All those moments, family vacations, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories, felt tainted now. By morning, I was emotionally drained. I hadn't slept a minute, and my body ached from the tension I'd been carrying. I needed to get out of the house, away from Olivia and the suffocating memories of what we used to be. I grabbed my keys and drove aimlessly for a while before ending up at my sister Megan's house. Megan and I had always been close. She was 5 years older than me, and in a lot of ways, she'd been like a second mom after our parents passed. I hadn't planned on telling her everything, but the moment she opened the door and saw my face, I crumbled. Daniel, she said, her brow furrowing. What's wrong? I need to talk, I managed to say, my voice breaking. She led me inside, her worry evident. I sat on her couch, my head in my hands, while she made us coffee. When she returned, I told her everything, about the accident, the messages, the confrontation. By the time I finished, I was shaking, and Megan looked like she was ready to march over to my house and confront Olivia herself. That witch, she said, her voice low and angry. "I can't believe she did this to you." "To Jacob." "She said it was because she was lonely," I said bitterly. "That she felt invisible." Megan snorted. "Oh, please. That's the excuse cowards use when they don't want to take responsibility for their actions. She had other options, Daniel. She could have talked to you. She could have gone to therapy. She didn't have to sleep with someone else, for God's sake." I nodded, but her words didn't bring much comfort. I keep thinking about Jacob," I said, my voice cracking. "How do I tell him? How do I explain that his mom and I aren't going to be together anymore?" Megan sighed, her expression softening. "You'll find a way. You're a great dad, Daniel. And Jacob is smart. He'll understand eventually, even if it's hard at first." I leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes. I feel like a failure. Like I should have seen this coming. "Don't you dare blame yourself," Megan said firmly. "This isn't on you. Olivia made her choices. She broke your trust. None of that is your fault." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the spiral of self-doubt I'd been sinking into. Megan spent the rest of the morning talking me through my options: divorce, custody, therapy. She even offered to help me look for a lawyer. "You're stronger than you think," she said, squeezing my hand. "This is going to hurt like hell, but you'll get through it. And I'll be here every step of the way." I left her house feeling a little more grounded. The pain was still there, a constant ache in my chest, but it wasn't as overwhelming. I knew I couldn't fix what Olivia had done, but I could take control of my future. Back at home, the house was quiet. Olivia was sitting in the living room, her face pale and drawn. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and desperation. "Daniel," she said softly, standing up. "Can we talk?" I shook my head. "Not right now. I need some time." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. I didn't respond. I went upstairs to Jacob's room, sitting on his bed and looking around at all the little pieces of his life, the Legos on the floor, the superhero posters on the walls, the stuffed bear he still clung to at night. I knew I had to be strong for him. No matter what happened, he was my priority. That night, as I lay in the guest room again, I thought about what Megan had said. She was right. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just a new chapter, one I hadn't chosen, but one I had to face. For Jacob. For myself. A week after the confrontation, I made the decision I'd been dreading: I was filing for divorce. It wasn't just about what Olivia had done to me, it was about what she'd done to us, to Jacob, to everything we'd built together. I sat in Megan's living room, phone in hand, scrolling through a list of divorce attorneys. Megan hovered nearby, offering coffee and moral support. "This one has good reviews," she said, pointing to a name on my screen. "She specializes in cases involving infidelity." I nodded and dialed the number. The first meeting with the lawyer, Emily, was tough. Laying everything out, my accident, the affair, the messages I'd found, felt like ripping off a Band-Aid over and over again. But Emily was calm, professional, and focused. She explained the process step by step, assuring me that I had a strong case for primary custody of Jacob. "You've been the steady parent," she said, taking notes as I talked. "And the evidence of the affair shows instability on her part. Courts take that seriously, especially when a child's well-being is involved." It wasn't going to be easy. Olivia wasn't the type to let go without a fight, and I braced myself for the battle ahead. When Olivia was served the divorce papers, her reaction was a mix of shock and anger. "You're really doing this?" she demanded, holding the envelope in her hands. "We have a son, Daniel. Are you just going to throw away our family?" "I'm not throwing anything away," I said evenly. "You did that when you chose him over us. The next few weeks were a blur of tense conversations, paperwork, and meetings with attorneys. Olivia tried everything to manipulate the situation: apologies, guilt trips, even threats to drag the divorce out if I didn't agree to joint custody. "I'm his mother," she said one night, her voice shaking with anger. "Do you really think you can take him from me?" "I'm not trying to take him from you," I said. "But Jacob needs stability, and I don't trust you to provide that right now." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered the messages, the nights she'd spent with Ryan while I was lying in a hospital bed, and my resolve hardened. Emily helped me gather everything I needed to support my case: the screenshots of Olivia's messages with Ryan, testimonies from Megan and others who'd noticed Olivia's behavior, and evidence of her neglect during my recovery. When we finally went to court, Olivia's lawyer tried to paint me as controlling and emotionally distant, a man who cared more about work than his family. But Emily was ready. She presented the evidence clearly and confidently, dismantling their arguments piece by piece. She emphasized the timeline of Olivia's affair, the impact it had on our family, and my unwavering commitment to Jacob's well-being. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in my favor. I was granted primary custody, with Olivia receiving visitation rights. When the ruling was announced, Olivia broke down in tears. "This isn't fair," she sobbed. "I'm still his mother. And I'm still his father," I said quietly. "But you made your choices, Olivia. Now we have to live with them." The divorce was finalized a few months later. Olivia moved into a small apartment nearby, and Jacob stayed with me in the house. At first, he didn't fully understand what was happening. "Why can't mommy live here anymore?" he asked one night as I tucked him into bed. I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes," I said. "And when that happens, they have to figure out a new way to live. But one thing will never change: both mommy and I love you very much." He nodded, his little brow furrowed in thought. "Will we still have family game nights?" "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "We'll still do all the things we love, buddy. It'll just look a little different." That seemed to satisfy him, and he drifted off to sleep. But for me, the nights were still long and lonely. I started seeing a therapist at Megan's suggestion. Talking to someone who wasn't involved in the situation helped more than I expected. I worked through the anger, the grief, and the guilt, slowly piecing myself back together. One session, my therapist asked, "What do you want your life to look like moving forward?" The question stayed with me. For so long, my life had been about being a husband and father. Now, I had to figure out who I was outside of that. I started small, taking Jacob on adventures to local parks, reconnecting with old friends, and even picking up hobbies I'd abandoned years ago. I rediscovered my love for woodworking, spending hours in the garage building furniture and fixing up the house. Through it all, Jacob was my anchor. His laughter, his curiosity, his unwavering love reminded me that I still had so much to be grateful for. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching his favorite cartoon, he leaned against me and said, "I like it when it's just us, Dad. It feels cozy." I hugged him tightly, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. "Me too, buddy," I said. It's been a year since the divorce was finalized. Olivia and I are civil, for Jacob's sake, but our relationship is strictly co-parenting. She's still seeing Ryan, though from what I hear, it's far from perfect. As for me, I've finally found peace. My days are filled with Jacob's soccer games, Saturday morning pancakes, and quiet evenings in the garage. I've even started dating again, though I'm taking things slow. If there's one thing this experience has taught me, it's that life doesn't always go as planned. But even in the midst of heartbreak, there's room for healing and growth. I'm stronger now, stronger for Jacob, for myself, and for the life we're building together. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, I want you to know this: you'll get through it. It'll hurt, and it'll take time, but you'll come out the other side. And when you do, you'll see that there's a whole world waiting for you. A world where you get to decide what comes next.